Hello, and thank you for joining me in this brief overview of how you can conduct your own community connectivity analysis, a tool to support inclusive community engagement and resilience. My name is Megan Picard, and I'm a partner at the Athena Group. I lead our community engagement pillar of services, and I adapted the tool that I'm going to share with you today from the Orton Family Foundation's Community Heart and Soul program. The community connectivity analysis is the first part of Athena's Resilient Communities philosophy and a first step in truly inclusive community engagement. Why use the CCA? There are three big questions you can use it to answer. 1, who's in our community? 2, how are people connected to each other in our community? And who's not connected? And 3, what are the best ways to reach and engage everyone? In a moment, I'm going to walk you through these 6 simple steps to conducting a community connectivity analysis. To get started, I strongly recommend that you gather as diverse a group as you can to help with at least steps 1 to 3. The more community wisdom you have in the room, the more robust your initial analysis will be. Of course, you should also check the group's thinking along the way as you talk with trusted connectors to gather information for steps 4 and 5. One last thing before diving into the steps. I want to share 2 terms that I will use. First, community. It can have a much broader meaning, but for the purposes of this simple overview of the CCA process, I mean all residents in a geographic area. Your city, or possibly an area within those boundaries, like a single neighborhood or school catchment area. Second, for those of you who may be wondering, an affinity group is a group of people linked by shared interests or other characteristics that can have an impact on life experiences, like race, age, or level of income. With that, let's get into the steps. First, we identify all the affinity groups that make up the community you want to engage. For this step, I offer 2 alternative approaches. Either way can lead to the same results in the end, so it's up to you to decide which way makes more sense for you to begin. One way is to start thinking about the whole community orientation, which you see on the left side of the screen. To do this, grab a whiteboard and a pen, virtual or real, and start brainstorming with your group. Ask yourselves, what are all the affinity groups that make up our community? It can be helpful to review the community profile produced by the U.S. Census Bureau to spark the group's thinking. Be sure to think beyond the big demographic categories you find there too. For instance, if you want to reach teenagers, it's important to consider the full diversity among them. And get more specific in your list, like young people involved in the arts or who are homeschooled. Also, be sure to consider all people who may have been missing from community activities or decision-making processes in the past. Now, as an alternative, which you see on the right side of the screen, is an easier starting point for some. Here, you can begin your analysis by thinking about connections to the broader community from your leadership group. Which groups do you each meet with, visit with, share interests and experiences with? Once you have listed all your connections, consider who is missing and add them to the list. Who's in the community that your group is not connected to? Again, you can use your community profile to help with this. In step 2, you'll identify networks associated with each affinity group. Networks may be community organizations like a shelter provider for people who are unhoused, or a particular church, synagogue, or mosque where a certain affinity group is known to gather. They may also be less formal groups related to a particular circumstance, like customers at a particular barbershop or salon. For this step, then, you want to review the list of affinity groups from step 1. Think of all the ways they're connected as a group and identify 1 or more major networks for each one. If you're really struggling to think about how a particular affinity group is connected to one another, it is possible that they aren't. They may be more isolated. Be sure to note this. You can ask connectors about this while you're gathering information for steps 4 and 5. If you find no additional information then, I suggest you consider developing a network of some kind to close that gap, since it's an important part of community resilience. Need help? You can book time with one of Athena's community engagement specialists, like me, to help develop a strategy. Now, in step 3, you'll identify network connectors. Connectors are people who are trusted by others in the network to provide sound counsel, useful information, and to help bring people together for decision-making, celebrations, and more. You might also refer to these individuals as trusted advocates. To complete the step, you'll review the list of networks identified in step 2 and identify at least one person that is active in that network and who is trusted by or able to facilitate connection with many people in the group identified in step 1, like a youth minister or an outreach worker or a salon manager. Include his, her, their contact information if available. Don't know this information? Ask someone on your planning team to volunteer to get it. And now I'm sharing steps 4 to 5 together, since you can often gather this information at the same time from the connectors you identified in step 3. Reach out to them, let them know what you're doing, and ask them if they'd be willing to share information about communication and engagement opportunities and preferences among the group or groups that they're connected to. Start with communication channels, meaning all the ways information is typically shared among the group. You may need to offer some examples to help the connectors understand what you're looking for. So I'm offering a few examples here. You might ask if the group has a regular newsletter, social media, or a well-used bulletin board. Or maybe people are used to getting blast emails or text messages or announcements in church. If so, find out if there's a possibility that you could share information through it, and if so, find out all the details you need to do so, like editorial guidelines and schedule. Then you can talk about engagement opportunities and preferences. By engagement opportunities, I mean events, meetings, and other places where people in an affinity group or network are known to gather or visit, where you may be able to talk with them, hear from them, or learn from them in some way. It is possible that this doesn't exist for a group. In that case, you'll need to plan a separate event or plan to reach folks through a brief survey, depending on what you learn about the group's preferences. Now, by preferences, I mean everything from the type of interaction you'll design, to the language or languages you'll communicate in, or the food you should be sure to include. Maybe a traditional community meeting with a presentation and Q&A or comment period is great for some groups. For others, you'll have more success engaging them by designing coasters with an important question on them and asking local bars to distribute them and post responses on their wall. And still others love to talk story in knitting circles or packing summer lunch boxes for kids. And still others are private and will only respond to confidential surveys, or they may open up in one-on-one conversations. Connectors are your best source for this information. Since engagement isn't always their expertise, though, you may also need to prompt them with some of these ideas. All the information you have gathered so far can be recorded in a simple spreadsheet like the one on the screen. This worksheet is also included in the CCA guide that you can access through the link on the screen. Now the last step. Review your data to find connections. Are groups connected by the same connector? Do any groups access the same communication channels or participate in the same engagement opportunities or have the same or similar engagement preferences? With this information, you can map the connections as well as any groups that are not connected to others. You can do this by using formal mapping software, sorting sticky notes on a wall, or drawing lines between network names on a whiteboard and noting how each group is connected. The example you see on the screen was done for a project on homelessness and was organized by the leadership group Connections First. With information like this, you can develop an engagement plan that meets people where and how they are most comfortable and most likely want to participate, and that makes the most efficient use of resources by reaching connected groups in the same way. Also, and very important, you can make special note of gaps in connectivity, which is where I encourage you to lean in. What special steps will you take to ensure that those voices are included in your engagement effort? The more you do this, the better your engagement efforts will be, and the more connected and resilient your community can become. Thank you all for taking this time to learn about conducting a community connectivity analysis. Please take a moment to share feedback so we can improve this information as we share it with others. Thank you again.